All that we're seeing from the president and the White House, would you call this desperation, of an incumbent president trying to, resist acknowledging the seriousness of his own COVID-19 infection, a crumbling American economy, and widespread hardship?
Well, I think what's happened is because of his illness and the situation we're in right now with the spiking of the illnesses and with the crumbling economy, he knows that not only are the polls going down, but history shows that whenever an incumbent is running for re-election in the middle of a crisis, the crisis is the most important thing that happens. All these other things are sideshows in a certain sense. So it was certainly in 1932 when President Hoover had failed to take a national responsibility for the growing depression. No national guidance, no ability to really get the economy moving again, ever kept saying, we're turning the corner now, things are going to be all right. And there was such a yearning for leadership that FDR won a landslide election. And the interesting thing is, once he won and the inauguration took place, headlines said, we have a leader, the government still lives. So I think that's where we're at right now in this country, the yearning for that kind of leadership. And it may have been that without his getting the illness, we would have been focused on the Supreme Court or focused on law and order situations. But now the virus is the center of our focus.
Wow.
Which it always should have been.
Yeah. And, and here we are a week out from, this moment when, the president was at Walter Reed. He did this video and he said, I get it. And maybe that was signposting that there was going to be some empathy coming from, the president. But then contrast that with yesterday's balcony, rally, his first public appearance since his diagnosis. Take a look.
It's been a very interesting journey. I learned a lot about COVID. I learned it by really going to school. This is the real school. This isn't the let's read the book school. And I get it, and I understand it, and it's a very interesting thing, and I'm going to be letting you know about it. Before going any further, I want to thank all of you for your prayers. I know you've been praying, and I was in that hospital. I was watching down over so many people, and I went out to say hello to those people, and I took a little heat for it, but I'd do it again. Let me tell you, I'd do it again.
So that's, a different tone in the president, and there's just a week span, that separates that. So were you anticipating, a president changed by a personal experience, like America has seen in some of his predecessors?
There really was a moment there when he talked about the bipartisan support that he'd gotten, that he'd learned a lot about this illness, that I began to imagine that maybe he would go forth and talk about the importance of how this adversity had changed him. And he understood the importance of masks, he understood the importance of social distancing, and would become a national leader. I mean, what happened to Franklin Roosevelt is when he got polio, it really did change him. It created a greater sense of humility of spirit. It allowed him to connect to other people to whom fate had dealt an unkind hand. He had understood the resilience that was necessary to get through this illness, through his own paralysis. So when he comes into office, he helps the country get through their paralysis with resilience, with optimism about the future, but confronting the brutal facts. So every now and then I just imagine maybe this will happen, but obviously we saw that it did not happen.
Today's New York Times, is reminding readers Trump campaigned on draining the swamp. But then the New York Times writes, and I'm quoting now, as president, he built a system of direct presidential influence peddling unrivaled in modern American politics. And when asked about that on ABC today, the president's son, Eric Trump, said this.
We're a hospitality company. We've got tens of millions of people staying at our properties every single year. The New York Times is absolute fake news. All they want to do is take down my father. And you know what's really interesting about the New York Times? I'm glad you mentioned them. Every single day, starting literally the morning of the debate, they've dropped some story that they've been sitting on for literally the last 6 months or year or 2 years to try and influence the election. It's horrible. I mean, the media is gone in this country. The media is gone in this country. I mean, even when I hear the tone of this conversation, the media has become the activist arm for the Democratic Party.
So Doris, perhaps another example of what you would call desperation by, this re-election campaign. I mean, so with 23 days, from Election Day, demonizing the media, undermining trust in a free and fair election during a pandemic. I mean, will this only intensify over the next few weeks?
Well, there's no argument about fake news that can compare with what the people are actually experiencing right now in terms of the virus. Not only the numbers who've died, but the radiation to all their families and all their friends. You can't claim that anybody's not taking the truth about that. And I think in the end, undermining the trust in our democracy is the most important thing we have to fight for right now. The power of democracy is the power of the ordinary vote. And people have fought for generations. When you think about the revolution, you think about the women's suffrage movement, you think about the civil rights movement in Selma, Alabama, lives were given to make that right to vote not be suppressed as it's being suppressed now. That's what we should be fighting right now, not all these distractions even about taxes or fake news. It's the reality of the situation we're in right now. This virus has to get under control before we can even get our country back. And the answer is for people to vote, and to vote without suppression, and to make sure they get to the polls.
Right. If anything, all of this should be added incentive. That's right, to not squander this opportunity, this right to vote, but get out there and vote, period. Doris Kearns Goodwin, always great to see you. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.